Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim. Assalamu alaikum. Good evening and welcome to another episode of The Review, the show where we discuss in depth the main stories of the day. Now, over recent weeks, we've been examining the worrying rise in Islamophobia. Our previous episodes looked at the ongoing situation in France, in the USA and in China, and of course here in the UK. Well, tonight we ask, is Islamophobia on the rise in the world's largest democracy? That is, of course, India. As usual, I'll be joined by a stellar panel of guests from across the globe, each specialist in their own field. Now, in the first half of tonight's show, I'm going to be joined by Aisha Rana and by Vijendra Kadalabal. We're also hoping to be joined by Amina Ahmed. And later in the show, I'm going to be joined by Sanita Wishwanath, by Rashid Ahmed, and by Shaheen Kati Parambal. Now, I'm going to be formally introducing my guests in just a moment, but before that, please take a look at this short film.
Coronajihad, the deliberate spreading of coronavirus by Muslims, is just one in a long line of false claims by Modi's BJP government. Other remarks have encouraged attacks on Muslim men who are dating Hindu women. Rumours that Muslims had traded or killed cows for beef has led to scores of Muslims being murdered. Whipped up by anti-Muslim sentiment, Hindu nationalist mobs in Delhi roamed the streets burning and looting mosques, homes and businesses. Muslims are also suffering bias through government policy, such as the Citizenship Act, which makes religion a basis for granting residency. In the northeastern state of Assam, around 1.9 million people who were not granted citizenship when India published the state's final register are believed to be held in detention camps. Indian government sources state that a declared foreigner is someone who was once considered an Indian citizen, but is now declared to be a foreigner by the Foreigners Tribunal. Not all of India agrees with Modi's policies, with protests being supported by Hindu and Muslim Indians alike. Can similarities be drawn between India's detention camps and the camps in Xinjiang? Is the anti-Muslim propaganda the forerunner of worse to come? We find out tonight on The Review.
Well, welcome back. Some extremely worrying images there and some worrying speculation about the direction that India is travelling in. Well, as I said, we're going to be joined tonight by guests from across the globe, really an international panel from the USA, from India, from all around the UK. I'd like to begin by introducing my guests that I have with me at the moment. I'll be introducing Amina Ahmed shortly. We're just trying to connect with her. On the line at the moment, I have Vijendra Kadalabal. Now, he calls himself a non-conventional educationalist by profession. He spent more than 4 years working with the indigenous communities from the eastern states of India. He returned to his city of Bangalore in 2020 after 9 years, currently leading a youth movement, an inherent believer in the power of collective. He is also a travel freak, a passionate a trekker, a movie buff, and a trained classical Carnatic singer. Fantastic. Vijay, welcome to the show. Thank you very much for your patience and thank you for joining us.
Thank you so much.
Thank you. We're also joined by Aisha Rana. She's a history student at the Jamia Millia Islamic University. She was catapulted to fame for defending a fellow student and journalist during anti-CAA protests in Delhi. Aisha, thank you again for joining us.
Thank you.
It's great.
My
It's great.
pleasure to be a part of.
Thank you very much. It's great to have you both on the show. We're hoping to be joined by Amina Ahmed very shortly. In the meantime, if I could perhaps start with yourself, Vijay. I mean, look, we see these trends in India at the moment, and lots and lots of words are being used to describe the direction that India, the BJP, the Modi government are taking. I'd like to take a little step back before we look at some of those terms, some of those potential allegations that are being made against the direction of the BJP in India at the moment. And let's take a little look at the history. India has regarded itself since its foundation as a secular state, and surely the protection of minorities has been part of that history, Vijay.
Definitely. I think when we made a choice, we had a choice after independence. The founding fathers of our country definitely choose to be a secular nation. And there was a partition, a very sad partition, which took place. And on both sides of the border, there were a conflict. But we need to remember that people choose the countries that they wanted to stay with. So irrespective of whether you are a Hindu, you are a Christian, you are a Muslim, everybody who stayed on the geographical border of India after partition needed to be given the same status of citizenship. That is the reason the Constitution, the preamble of the Constitution mentioned clearly the word secular, and governments of the initial decades, of 4 or 5 decades, made sure that this is communicated across the country with such diversity. So secularism has been one of the most significant aspect of our constitution, and also, like you rightly mentioned, special efforts are made to ensure that minority populations do not feel any different from the other communities.
Right, thank you. Aisha, if I could ask you, so, I mean, look, 7 decades of secular history in India, as Vijay quite just clearly told us, it's enshrined in the constitution by the founding fathers of India, that this is a nation that is going to respect religious plurality, religious diversity. It's a nation in which people from all backgrounds are going to feel citizens in that nation. Aisha, tell us, when did things start to change? When did we see this, the flavour and the mood music within Indian politics go from the fringes to the mainstream in the direction that we're seeing it now?
To be precisely about the date, it started from 2014 when the Sangh Parivar government started to come into the power. From 2014 to until this movement, like I have been going through all the experiences being personally, and I have heard the people who are talking about how insecure they are to live in a country like India, even in this century. The term secularism itself become a problematic one in our current context in India. Secularism actually means giving equal rights and equal opportunity to, or taking an equal stand in the case of every religion. But at the case of India right now, what is happening is the government, let it be the government, let it be the bureaucracy, everyone is polarized to the direction of Hinduism or Hindu nationalism. The main aim which the BJP government have always been talking about is they wanted to create a Hindutva Rashtra, which is dominated by the ideologies and policies of the Hindu religion. That doesn't mean that all the people who belongs to that community wanted to become like that, but at the same time, the BJP government, the Sangh Parivar government aims in doing that particular kind of thing, and they have been trying all their best to do that in all these sorts of things. Like being in India, we have generally defined Islamophobia as a fear or a hatred or a prejudice against a particular religion, especially Islam. But in Indian context, Islamophobia is clearly deep-rooted only based on the hatred towards that particular religion, towards that people who believe in that particular religion. Every day, Indian citizens, they have been being subjected to mob lynching, love jihad issues. You might have been already been heard about the Citizenship Amendment Act and what the people has been facing regarding that, what the people of the Assam, what the people of the Northeast area have been going through due to that particular act or particular law.
Well,
so,
thank you. Sorry, I'm going to come back to the Citizen Amendment Act shortly. I mean, it seems to be a very sort of a that's what I'm looking for. It seems to have been a moment that really has focused all of the problems and certainly brought it to international attention. Before we come to CAA, I wanted to ask Vijay, I mean, this can't have come out of the blue. Of course, we just heard Aisha say, yes, 2014, we know the Modi government, BJP, were elected. We know that they were re-elected with a landslide more recently than that. But was this something that was simmering under the surface beforehand? I mean, we know that the roots of the BJP, if they take their guidance from the RSS, is something that goes back to the 1920s, modelled itself potentially on European fascism in its ideology. Has this been something that's been simmering under the surface over the decades leading up to the overt issues that we see now?
I think you're absolutely right in pointing out there. It was not as if that out of the blue when we had a majority government of the Sangh Parivar. I would also like to differentiate between the two terminologies, Hindutva and Hinduism.
Yes.
Hindutva is a political ideology which originated around the year 1929 from the founders of Rashtriya Swayamsevak Sangh, where they envisioned a large country, Akhand Bharat as they call it. According to them, Pakistan, Afghanistan, Bangladesh, and larger part of Asia come under one particular nation state, whereas Hinduism, the religion, doesn't talk of any geographical boundaries.
Right.
That is where we need to be really understand that the current Hindutva forces have, in a way, hijacked Hinduism and claim it to be their own. I'm currently associated with an organization called Hindus for Human Rights, which is probably one of the few organizations which I know which is trying to counter Hindutva using Hinduism. Coming back to your question, there have been communal riots consistently, but I think the turning point was in 1992 when the Sangh Parivar was able to mobilize enough crowd, enough political movement, what they called as the Ram Janmabhoomi movement. They were able to demolish a sacred site of the Muslim community called Babri Masjid.
The Babri Masjid,
and in a large country which was secular, if you bring down a huge mosque, which was telecasted live on air, and you have no prosecution for that almost till date. And before even Babri Masjid was demolished, the national media, we had just two news channels back. Doordarshan was the national channel back then. We had months of a television series called Ramayan, which went into each and every household in every part of India. So as an academician, as anybody who understands, or even as a local citizen, we need to understand there cannot be no relation between these kind of events. So Babri Masjid demolition led to huge communal riots across the country. Then we had various bomb blasts in Mumbai as a response to that. So like you rightly mentioned, communal tensions were, I think, simmering under the surface. What happened in 2014 was a massive mandate came to a party which clearly mentioned making Hindu Rashtra, the Hindutva ideology as the land, as the law of the land in its political agenda. When they had the mandate, it became very clear that they're going to bring in laws which will favor them to move towards a Hindu nation.
Yeah.
And like you rightly said, the founders of this philosophy, the founders of RSS have clearly mentioned in multiple books of theirs how they are clearly influenced by the Nazi ideology or the fascist ideology that was recurring in the different parts of Europe.
I mean, that really is strong words. And I was looking at some articles by some international news agencies where they were using that word. They were using the word fascist. Is India becoming, fascist in its ideology? Aisha, we're going to a break in just a moment. Before we go to that break, I wanted to come back to you just on what Vijay was saying about the Babri Masjid back in 1992 and how there was a lack of accountability. The prosecutions weren't brought, that people were not held to account. Is this something that you're seeing today in your work, in your efforts, in your protests, that speaking out against this new direction, do you see that those who are performing the lynchings, those who are bringing the violent attacks, that there's little or no account for their actions brought by the state?
No, there is no account by the state. Even the state is, showing a neglecting attitude towards the people who are doing that particular kind of things. Like we have been talking before, Vijay have told about the historical context regarding that. Vinayak Damodar Savarkar or the Veer Savarkar is considered to be the person from whom the RSS or the BJP got their basic ideology which they are doing or they are trying to implement right now. Like once he has told, like if we Hindus in India grow stronger in time, this Muslim friends of the League type will have to play the part of German Jews instead. That is how he has told, or he has put forward that even in the 1939.
Yeah.
So after the BJP government coming into the power, they have started to implement all these things very evidently. Even mob lynchings are happening all around. Babari verdict, each individual know that the court verdicted not win the path of justice. But even though it is like the court is just acting according to what the government wanted or what they have to do. Every case, even we are taking in the case of the mob lynching happening around, the Lao Jihad cases happening around, any petitions that have been going around the CAA movement or anything. In every case, the government is showing a negligence, and the very sad part is that the judiciary is also standing along with the government in all these kind of things.
Right. I mean,
so.
That's crucial, where you say the judiciary is standing alongside the government, where that separation of powers begins to break down. We worry if we look at the definition of fascism. We see some extremely concerning direction, as I said before, in the way that the management and the government of India is going. Look, we're going to go to a short break now. I would like to come back and ask you both about day-to-day life. What is the experience like daily living in India at the moment? How much has that changed over the last few years? What sort of implications there are for minorities within India? So please do stay with us. We do hope to be joined by our other guest, Amina Ahmed, when we come back from the break. So, brothers and sisters, ladies and gentlemen, stay with us. We're going to continue this talk on Islamophobia in India just after this break. Assalamu alaikum and welcome back to The Review. Now, in our first segment, we were looking a little bit at the history of secularism within India, certainly established by the founding fathers, and when things started to change. I'm very pleased to say I've been joined by my new guest. We're going to continue the conversation with her and with my other guests. I'm still joined by our friend Vijay and our sister Aisha, who are both in India. And thank you guys so much for joining us, by the way. 3 a.m. in the morning, truly an international show. 3 a.m. in the morning in India and 3 p.m. in the afternoon in Chicago, where we have Amina Ahmed. Now, Amina Ahmed is a social activist. She's a public speaker and she's host of the talk show Next Gen, where she seeks to amplify the voices of young people. Amina is the co-founder of the campaign Art as Resistance in honour of Shaheen Bagh and the youth leader of the non-profit organisation, the Indian American Muslim Council. Amina has been featured in multiple newspapers and journals, including the Chicago Tribune. Welcome, Amina, to the show.
Thank you so much for having me here today. Thank you.
It's our pleasure. As I said, we began the show in the first segment talking about the historical context and looking at the change of direction recently. I'd like to ask you a little bit about your work. We said in the introduction there that you established this group, the co-founder, Art as Resistance, in honour of Shaheen Bagh. Tell us about Shaheen Bagh and tell us about this organisation that you started.
So we started, Art as Resistance in honor of Shaheen Bagh, and the whole goal was to show and display the courage of the women of Shaheen Bagh. And I am in the diaspora, so the work that we do, we try to make sure that we are always connected to those back home, to the activists that are on the ground, that we are serving their purpose, right? So the reason we started it was to display the work that they do. And we started it as a collaborative effort between Hindus for Human Rights, another nonprofit organization, and the Indian American Muslim Council. And we had artists from all around the world, whether it be Botswana to Germany to Mexico, to New Jersey. We had all of these artists come together to submit pieces. They weren't being paid or anything like that, from their own will, to show to show who the women of Shaheen Bagh are and to display solidarity with them. And we ended up connecting back to the activists and showing them the pieces that we had created. And one of the things that kind of, hit me was when one of the activists of Shaheen Bagh told me that I'm gonna, we find support and empowerment from these pieces. We know, through these pieces that the world is watching us. And the reason that kind of took me aback was, the artists that were creating these pieces were doing it in awe of these women. And these women, came back to us and told us that they see us and they feel supported by us. And you also asked what Shaheen Bagh is. And to put it very simply, Shaheen Bagh is, a way of thinking in a way as well. And I don't say that by myself. I say that quoting a woman of Shaheen Bagh, because when COVID-19 hit, they had, shut down these month-long sit-in protests led by mostly, middle to lower class Muslim women. They had shut these down. And these women who were protesting for months on end against the CAA were now at home. And I was talking to one of the women and I said, how are you doing now that Shaheen Bagh is shut down? And she told me, that, Amina, you're wrong. And I was like, what do you mean I'm wrong? And she said, Shaheen Bagh is not shut down because Shaheen Bagh was never just these physical protests. She told me in my language that Shaheen Bagh ek soch hai. Shaheen Bagh is a way of thinking, right? It is a revolutionary mindset. And we saw these in the protest slogans. We saw it on the placards that said Inqilab Zindabad, that long live the revolution. And it is a way of thinking. It is a revolutionary way of thinking, of resistance against the increasingly fascist Indian government. And again, these pieces, these art pieces, were showing what these women are doing and standing in solidarity with them.
Well, thank you. I mean, that's amazing work and incredible to hear about that sort of, that strength of that activism and against all the odds, really, because really the political climate is a very, very difficult place to be at the moment. I do want to come back and touch on that issue of the diaspora and how support from outside India is perceived and impacts the people who are campaigning within India. But as I mentioned earlier, what I'd like to do is ask our guests who are within India themselves, in Kerala and in Bangalore, Vijay and Aisha respectively, about the impact of these changes on day-to-day life. Because sometimes we see political change, we hear about political change, and it's something very highbrow. It's something that is just happening in the circles of government. It happens within a political bubble, and the actual life on the street doesn't change very much. Vijay, if I can ask yourself, are the changes in direction that we're seeing in India at the moment, are they something felt acutely on the street? Is it something that the average Indian minority in particular will have noticed in their day-to-day life?
I think definitely yes. Like we said, even before 2014, there were always tension which were subsurface, right? If you are a Muslim, it's going to be tough in India for you to find a home. As simple as that. Wow. People would be scared, not scared. They might not want to give their home to somebody who comes from a Muslim community. Now, the reason for that can be multiple. But what happened after 2014 is through various legal provisions made, the government has found ways to protect people who are actually attacking the persons from the other community. The instances of mob lynching has been on a historic high. And recently, Karnataka passed a law which protects the vigilantes of mob lynching. So it's ironic. Most of the victims come from the Muslim community, and it's not even sure. They're not even sure of whether the animal that is being slaughtered is a cow, is a buffalo, or is it done legally? Is it done in an illegal trade? It's just the sense of the kind of backing that they're getting. But as a common treatment, I remember a very small incident which happened during the lockdown. There were two instances. One was how the terminology Coronajihad became so viral. Even within my own family, if I just tried to bring in facts, I would be called a Muslim sympathizer.
Right.
Without understanding that what I'm talking is about facts. A vegetable trader who happened to be Muslim was recorded on camera being beaten and asked to get off the street by an elected member of the parliament. So it's as simple as this. People who are doing their livelihoods on the streets, who cannot afford to stay at home and be glued onto their WhatsApp and Facebook statuses, it is those people who are being impacted. Suddenly, if you are wearing a skull cap and you are being witnessed on the street, people will start murmuring around you. I've seen this happen around me. We had slums in Bangalore being brought down on the rumors that the people living inside the slums were Bangladeshi illegal migrants.
Yeah.
These people were not Bangladeshis, they were Indians living from 2 to 3 decades here. And all of these was sponsored by one of the elected representatives. So the backing that they have from the mainstream media, fueled up with WhatsApp messages and the use of WhatsApp and Facebook by the ruling regime, had infused a sense of demonizing Muslims in every common Indian citizen.
I mean, it's truly shocking. I think for people who live in other democracies, I mean, India, the largest democracy in the world, who, we consider ourselves in Europe as living in, pluralistic, secular states where people have freedom of expression, freedom of religion up to a degree. It's shocking. It's genuinely shocking to hear that it's sanctioned at such a high level and at such a street level that you talk about, that actually legislation is now being brought in. And Aisha, I saw you nodding your head when Vijay spoke about, legislation now which actually protects the vigilantes. I mean, Aisha, you're clearly a Muslim woman. You're somebody who can't sort of dissolve into the background. You wear a headscarf, you're a Muslim woman. What has life been like for minorities, Muslim minorities, and for other minorities in the last few years at a street level, on a day-to-day level?
The life with the minorities has become very difficult to live in India. It's like every day, if even we are putting up this issue, they will be telling like you should go to Pakistan or you should go to some other country, because this is not, according to them, for every minorities. I'm not talking about either in the case of Muslims only. For everyone, it's like this is not your country. You should go to other country. So talking about the Muslims, they do not have the right to have the justice, equality, and individuality in India. And those who challenges all these things, they are taglined as national, anti-national, Pakistani, jihadi, and now there is a new term along with this farmers' protest is happening. The Sikh people are in the forefront against that, and they are labeled as Khalistanis. So everyone who challenges or who stand against this anti-constitutional measures, they are labeled as, and they are otherized, and they are discriminated in each and every field. Even I was, called and I was told as to be the terrorist and jihadist by all the mainstream medias of, especially we will call this mainstream media Godi medias, because they support and they'll utter whatever the government is talking about. So the Godi medias have taglined me as a jihadist and terrorist. So that is the condition of each and everyone who is living in India right now. And very recently in the UP, love jihad issue happened. For them, or for the people, or for the BJP government, it is like inter-religion marriage between Muslims and Hindus is not allowed. But it is applicable, or it's okay with all other set of religion or all other group of people. But when it comes to the Islam Muslim community and that of the Hindus, that is not applicable for them. It is like it's a big crime, because they have made, or they have put up Muslim men as a rapist kind of, or a demon kind of. Everyone should be very fear of. The very funniest fact is that they even run campaigns in support of all that things. There is one campaign called Bahu Lao Beti Bachao, which means bring a daughter-in-law and save a daughter. That is just to ensure that Hindu woman is not married to the Muslim woman. The same thing which we can see in the case of Muslim women also. Everyone, I'm not even, criticizing or even criticizing only Hindu community, but I'm also telling about the liberal community in India. Everyone wanted to empower Muslim women. Everyone wanted to bring out the Muslim woman, and they themselves have, made or tagged Muslim woman is someone under the hijab, someone so much suppressed by the Muslim men and all. So when the anti-CAA movement happened, the activists told me that you broke the stereotype of the Muslim woman. It's really weird for me.
Yeah.
According to me, I'm not suppressed under my hijab. I'm not suppressed under my husband or my father or the men in my family. But the outside world, that is the other peoples, have considered, or they have tagged, or they have marked Indian Muslim women into that. When a Muslim woman is coming to the street and they are talking about or against all these things, then suddenly they will start to confine that particular person inside the secularistic norms, which is very problematic. As I earlier pointed out, secularism is a term which has become very complicated and problematic right now in India.
I mean, that's, again, you know, for fear of repeating myself, just shocking. Genuinely shocking, hearing the day-to-day experience of minorities in what has been, you know, prided itself for generations on being this secular state, a state where, you know, people from all backgrounds and all races and all faiths live together. You know, the melting pot of the world, India has been seen as for so long. And it's really disheartening to hear that, and really incredible to hear about your efforts and your work. I want to come back to Amina and ask about, look, I mean, you know, from the relative safety of the United States, how important is it for you to feel a part of the campaign against this sort of racism, this prejudice, and the groups that you're working with? Are you working from the United States? Are you working with groups who are themselves in India and supporting them?
Sure. So I think that we both just heard Vijay and Aisha, and the fact that they've been labeled an anti-national, they've been labeled, you know, a Pakistani or this and that. And, you know, because Aisha is also a Muslim woman, that comes with all of those other negative stereotypes of being oppressed and all of that. And I have, you know, like I said before, all of the work that we do, we make sure that we connect back to activists in India. We are doing this work in solidarity with them, right? This isn't for our own self or anything like that. So I think that in the diaspora, when we look at India right now, there are activists that are speaking up, and what is happening to them? They're being threatened. There's tear gas and water cannons used against, you know, farmers in India that we're seeing right now. Some are being, you know, imprisoned. Their families are being threatened. In the United States, in the diaspora, in the UK, in the West, wherever else it is, we have the privilege to raise our voices. And I think that if we're not using that privilege, we're accountable. You know, you're living in a country where you can raise your voice, where you aren't being brutalized for raising your voice. And if you're not doing so, you're not using that privilege. So what we are doing in the diaspora isn't something that should be applauded or, you know, some savior type of role. We're just doing what we have to do, what we should do, what we have to use our privilege to do.
And may God give you strength to continue to do that. Look, we are coming up to another break. It's been fantastic having you guys here. Again, thank you, literally on opposite sides of the world. I want to ask you one question before we leave, potentially something rather controversial. We've heard the term fascism branded about. I've certainly seen it in the media in my research for today from a number of international news agencies. And just before we go, I'd like to ask you really a simple yes or no question. I'm going to just read out the dictionary definition of fascism and whether you think that this applies today, as we hear in 2020, to the Indian state. So fascism is a form of far-right authoritarianism, ultranationalism, characterized by dictatorial power, forcible suppression of opposition, and strong regimentation of society and the economy, which came to prominence in the early 20th century. Do you, if I can start with yourself, Vijay, and as I said, we are coming up to a break, do you feel that India is either on its way to being a fascist state or is now a fascist state?
I think apart from the word dictatorial, because on paper we are still a democracy, everything that you said is exactly what India is right now.
Right. And yourself, Aisha?
Yes, exactly. India isn't going through a fascist country right now. And yes, I agree completely with that definition. And
finally, from yourself, Amina.
100%. I agree with that as well. You were reading through the list and, you know, almost every point I said check, check, check in my mind. So I agree. Yeah.
Well, on that rather depressing note, we thank each of the three of you for joining us. Thank you. As again, I repeat, it's 3 a.m. in India, so we are extremely indebted to Vijay and Aisha for staying up and for joining us. Thank you so much for giving us that really valuable insight as to what life is like, you know, day to day in India. And of course, thank you, Amina, for joining us from the United States. I know it's a more pleasing 3 p.m. over there, right. But again, thank you all for your time, for your expertise, and for your fantastic work that you're doing. Because look, one thing that history teaches us, these regimes will always fall. Fascism will defeat itself sooner or later, and it's the work and the effort of people like yourself that's going to make that happen. So again, thank you all. May God bless you. To our viewers, don't go anywhere. We're going to be joined after the break by 3 more experts to continue talking about the subject of Islamophobia in India. We'll see you just after this break. Assalamu alaikum and welcome back to The Review, and looking tonight at the rise of Islamophobia in India. Well, those of you who joined us in the first half would have seen an excellent panel of guests that we had talking about the history of pluralism, of religious freedom within India, how that has changed in the last few years, and the impact on the streets day to day of being a minority in India today. Well, I'm now joined by 3 new guests, 2 of them joining me from the United States and 1 from here in the UK. Again, a stellar panel, an incredible level of expertise amongst them. I'd like to introduce them now. If I could start by introducing Rashid Ahmed. After working in private industry, in 2008 he transitioned full-time into the social good or non-profit sector, starting as the executive director of the Islamic Medical Association of North America, known as IMANA. He currently leads the Indian American Muslim Council, which he co-founded. Now, he co-founded the US India Policy Institute, and he was its president for 8 years. Rashid was a board member and treasurer of the World Congress of Muslim Philanthropists. Rashid, thank you very much for joining us. Thank you. Okay. We also have with us Shaheen Kati Parambal. He's currently undertaking doctoral research at the Department of Sociology and Social Policy at the University of Leeds. Shaheen, thank you very much for joining us. Thank you. Excellent. And we have with us Sanita Wishwanath. Now, Sanita spent the past 25 years working to empower women's rights and human rights, and in June 2019 co-founded Hindus for Human Rights. Her work with Women for Afghan Women was awarded the Feminist Majority Foundation's Global Women Rights Award in 2011. She was also honoured by none other than President Obama at the White House in 2015 as a champion of change, in recognition of her work with Sadhana, which is an organisation established to help American Hindus to connect with their faith and connecting their faith with social justice and with human rights. Thank you, all 3 of you. We're very honoured to have you with us. Thank you very much. If I could begin, perhaps, ladies first. Incredible work that you've done, Sanita, over the years. I'd like to ask you, we spoke about, the day-to-day experience on the streets of people, and our guests in our first half were people who were living in India, 2 of them. You surely are connected with people in India. What is it that you're hearing from family, from friends, about the day-to-day impact of the change of direction of Indian politics?
Thank you so much for including me and also my colleague Vijay from Hindus for Human Rights in the previous session. I really believe that it's important that Hindus anywhere in the world speak up on this issue of human rights in India, because the atrocities that we've been hearing about, for years, are happening in the name of our faith. So thank you for including us. Basically, there's 2 realities. If you speak to people who are from the Hindu community, not everybody, but a lot, most of them, you will hear that everything is okay in India. When you speak to people from the minority communities or progressive people who maybe don't consider themselves part of the Hindu community, just secular Indians, people whose eyes are open, you will hear, or if they're from the minority communities, you'll hear another story. Media is divided. You go to the media that tells you whatever strengthens your, the reality that that you want to hear about. So, what you heard on the previous session isn't what you would hear, for instance, if you speak to people in my extended family.
Right, it's very interesting. Really interesting that you talk about that idea that as a Hindu, how important it is for you to speak out, because this is being done, supposedly in the name of your faith. And it's something that Muslims feel would identify very, very strongly with that. We're always saying, not in our name. This is not our faith, the stuff that we see presented in the media. If I can come to Rashid in the middle, you've worked extensively with a lot of different organizations. How worrying are the trends that we're seeing? Do you think this is the beginning of the end or the end of the beginning? You know, are we seeing something that's hit its zenith, or are we seeing that, you know, India is going more and more towards the desperately worrying fascist labels, extremist labels that are so far away from how it was established just, 7 decades ago?
That's an interesting question. I don't know if it has zenith, as you call it. Definitely not. However, in this ideology of Hindutva, which is like Sunita referred to, is not Hinduism, started in 1923. Even one can argue a bit before that with another organization called Hindu Mahasabha. But ever since 1923, they had in the beginning, they had a very, very culturally framed agenda. But in last 20 years, it has become very political. And then in last 10 years, it become very militant. And now it is a ideology that is basically even referring economists, latest economists, they want to make it a one party. They want to make India a one party political system. And that party, from their perspective, should be BJP, which adheres to the RSS ideology of Hindutva. So this is, from their perspective, this is just the beginning of the Hindu Rashtra, as they want to call it or see it. So it is definitely not on the zenith. From their perspective, is still Indian Muslims and other minorities are still the citizens of India. That is something on their agenda. They have been this ideology is proponent of making Muslims, Christians, and communists a second-class citizen, if that. That is a very open ideology they have. So I wouldn't say it has come to zenith, but it has reached to a point where they control the most of the levers of the government and the social levers like media and all other that goes with the society to control or give their message.
Yeah, I mean, and that's something we heard actually in the first segment about how this sort of separation of powers is breaking down. That these rules, these new laws that are being brought in, they're not really there's no formal way to challenge them. That the judiciary seem to be also working alongside the legislature and the executive in ensuring that these things are not challenged and that it's impossible for minorities to speak up against this. Shaheen, if I could ask you, how do you feel? Somebody who lives now, outside India, when you look in, is this a country that you recognize? Is it a country that your family who are living there recognize? How worried are you about what you see happening in India at the moment?
I think, thank you for the question. I think worrying would be put in a very slight way. It is much more than worrying. We need to find some other adjective to describe that feeling, actually. Apart from the feeling of insecurity, there is also this constant questioning that are Muslims Indian, or can a Muslim be an Indian? Yeah. The atmosphere has reached that way. So there's also this sort of psychological divide inside Muslims because of the atmosphere, that at one point we are Muslims. And because of the fact that we are Muslims, we are target for annihilation. At the same time, we are Indian as well. So there is this sort of a psychological dichotomy between a person being an Indian and a Muslim as of now in India. It's become very, very difficult. So this element of foreignness is always imposed upon Muslims inside.
Yeah.
So even if you travel, the moment you step in an airport, you land in India, you reach your home, it's always a very, very precarious situation there.
I mean, it's unimaginable, really. I mean, I visited India in sort of several times between 2011, 2014, 15, and I felt so at home. My father's family are originally from India. They were Muslim. And I felt very at home. Having never even been there before, I felt very welcomed, I felt very at home. And to have seen such a radical change in such a short space of time. And we know, again, from the first half, and we know from what you were saying, Rashid, that this is something that's been under the surface for a long time. But it's this dangerous leap into the mainstream. And you mentioned there, Shaheen, that the issue of being, the question about being Indian and Muslim, and how this identity is now being challenged, which brings me on very nicely to the CAA, the Citizen Amendment Act, and this idea that people who are second, third, fourth generation Indians are no longer Indian. If I could bring that to you, Sunita, what has been the impact of the CAA in galvanizing both sides, in galvanizing the kind of giving voice to the racist, prejudiced forces, but in also bringing worldwide attention to the nature of this government?
So on the side that supports the CAA and the NPR together, it's the combination that's lethal, by the way. There's this, it's emphasizing this feeling that we're surrounded by countries which are Muslim majority countries, where the minority communities are greatly persecuted. Some of that is even true, and that India is this caring country that is giving away for Hindus and non-Hindu minorities in these Muslim country neighbors to come and find safe passage in India. And of course, the immediate argument, and this is against even India's constitution, because each of those countries will have minorities within Muslim communities, like Shia Muslims in Afghanistan, for instance, who are persecuted and whose lives are at risk. So if it's true that they care about persecuted minorities, it should be all, or obviously the Rohingya Muslims in Myanmar. So it should be about all minorities who are persecuted. So that's my response to the side that supports CAA. But for me, and so many all across India, because when the CAA was announced last December, I think it might have been December 12th, within days there were protests in Delhi and then across India, because immediately Muslims, but also everybody who understands what democracy means, understood right away that this is a scary citizenship law that makes religion a litmus test for citizenship. And so it didn't take long for there to be, and Shaheen Bagh is one inspirational place of protest, but there were Shaheen Baghs. I was in India last winter. Wow. There were Shaheen Baghs everywhere in India. And if coronavirus had come, they would probably still be going on. And I ask, the detention centers that are being built, if we have this combination of laws, what it basically means is that in India, in most countries, the burden of proof is not upon you to prove your citizenship. But in India, they're saying that in order to go through the NPR, you have to provide all the paperwork to show that you are a citizen. India is a country where so many people are illiterate, and even in families that are literate, like in my extended family, so many people don't have. My mother doesn't have her birth certificate. Yeah. So there's going to be so many people who cannot provide those documents. Yeah. So the CAA gives a fast track for everybody but Muslims.
Yeah, so
what that means is that the Muslims who cannot provide those documents, what's going to happen to them? That's probably what those detention centers are for. And then the rest, I let your imagination take you to where it goes. I am terrified.
Yeah, and I think, and it is terrifying what you talk about. I live in the UK. I'm born and bred here in the UK. My mother was Irish, European, all her life. I can't find my mother's birth certificate. You imagine, a family perhaps where there is illiteracy, or, generations ago they came to India. How are they supposed to prove that? It's not surprising that people are afraid. If I can come to you, if I
may add something to it.
Yes, please go ahead.
It's not just that Indian Muslims or anybody has to bring the papers to prove their citizenship. What makes it even more problematic is, even if you brought the citizenship or the papers required, a clerk level person can say this is not correct. Right. Now again, the burden of proof on the person who actually provided the proof And that process is again a legal process. And then even after that, the law also leaves the room for any citizen or any neighbor questioning that we don't think that this person is a citizen, even though he may have provided the paper. Then again, the process starts of proof of burden. That's what makes it goes to the heart of the intent, that the intent of the law is one way or other, you need to deny citizenship to Muslims.
I mean, and that is incredibly undermining. The fact that, as you said, somebody at clerk level is able to undermine your right to be in the country. Your neighbours can make accusations against you, saying that you don't have the rights to be here. I mean, if I can throw that across to you, Shaheen, when there is such impunity for people in the way that they're acting, what resources are there? What avenues are there for communities who are being oppressed, who are being treated unfairly, to voice their concern, to have their day in court?
Yeah, at least till 2014, there was this narrative among Indian Muslims that the judiciary is the only neutral avenue left for Muslims for recourse to justice. But as we have seen the last couple of years, or in the last 6 years or so, even that option is no more with the recent Babri Masjid verdict and the recent triple talaq. So even the judiciary, that is supposed to be the neutral legislative body in India, even that judiciary is now, Muslims feel that there is no recourse to that. Second, also the political platforms that try to offer an alternative to the BJP, even they have fallen short in the past of actually representing anything for Muslims. So both in terms of political platforms, in terms of judiciary, so the institution-wise, there is an exclusion, the marginalization of Muslims. So it becomes very difficult for Muslims to actually do something about it. And the third option which they would have is to maybe launch their own Muslim-based political party. Right. Then again, in the Indian social sphere, you have certain terminologies that any attempt at asserting a Muslim identity or a Muslim agency could always be disciplined by labels of extremism, terrorism, or even communalism, even from those from outside the BJP as well. So that also creates sort of a political impediment for Muslim progress here.
Yes. Okay, well, look, we're going to be going to a break in a few minutes. I mean, I keep using the same words, it's terrifying, it's alarming, it's shocking, hearing just how bad things are. And when you don't have anywhere to turn internally, perhaps externally pressure can be brought. Now, after the break, I'd like to come back to my respected guests and ask, what sort of pressure can be brought from the outside, whether it's grassroots organizations like yourselves or whether it's higher up the political sphere, at governmental level, that can be brought to bring pressure on India, and how effective that's likely to be. So do stay with us. Thank you very much. Guys, brothers, sisters joining us, don't go anywhere. We're going to be coming back, continuing with the question of Islamophobia in India just after the break. Assalamu alaikum. Welcome back to the final part of tonight's review. We've been looking at the subject of Islamophobia in India. We're still joined by our honoured guests. We have Sanita Wishwanath, we have Rashid Ahmed, and we have Shaheen Khatib Parambal, who are still with us. Thank you guys for staying with us. I'll be coming back to you guys in just a second. Now, it's been fantastic, by the way. Sanita, you thanked us for having you on the show as a Hindu yourself. And of course, we had Vijay in the first half. We'd like to extend our thanks, of course, to people of all faiths and all backgrounds. These are issues which transcend faith and background. These are issues that affect us all as our human family. So we do thank you, and thank you there for being a voice, a balanced voice. And speaking of balance, we approached the Indian embassy here in the UK, and we told them about today's show, Islamophobia in India, and we asked them, first of all, to join us, and we asked them to comment, and they declined either to join us or to comment. So we leave that to the viewers' own discretion as to why. Coming back to the subject we were talking about with Shaheen, just before the break. Yeah. You were talking about, whether people wish to take it through a formal, a route through the courts, or whether they wish to set up a political party, or whether they wish to go through their local campaign. Any way that they wish to campaign and complain about the injustices of the way they're being treated, they're kind of checkmated. There's no way to go. Which brings us to what else can we do? So, Sunita, if I can come to you on that, how important is it? I mean, you yourself are, you're in New Mexico in the United States. How important is it for the Indian diaspora and people from outside the Indian diaspora, as we've mentioned, just the people who care about human rights, to be speaking up and bringing pressure on within their local communities to raise awareness and bringing pressure on the Indian government through their own governments? How important is that?
It's of critical importance. I'm a Hindu Indian living in the States, grew up a bit in England too, and I'm the co-founder of Women for Afghan Women. I didn't say it's Afghanistan, it's a Muslim community, it's got nothing to do with me. We have a responsibility as human beings to be there for each other. And I'm from the Hindu faith, and like most of our religions, I believe that we are connected, we are one, regardless of the differences between us, because we are, actually as a Hindu, I believe that God is in you and me equally and identically. And so absolutely it is urgent, it's critical that everybody around the world and inside India who cares about human rights do whatever they can, and whatever avenue is available to us to raise awareness, we must take it. There's no hierarchy. If somebody is a political activist and wants to get involved in politics, that's what they can do. They should do. I'm a grassroots activist and I'm a Hindu, and right now my Hindu community is either not admitting there's a problem or doesn't know there's a problem or is agreeing with what's happening. So I feel that the greatest, thing I can do is to work within the Hindu community and open people's eyes. And I'm an optimist in that, 1 billion people aren't all fascists. Yeah. Some sizable proportion of people from my community, when they open their eyes, will do the right thing and turn this juggernaut, this evil juggernaut of Hindutva around.
Well, that's what we hope. And certainly history tells us that, any sort of fascistic ideology tends to sort of self-implode, sooner or later. The question here is it going to be sooner or is it going to be later? Rashid, if I can come to you, as a Muslim outside the United States, what sort of pressure can you bring from within your community to help and assist those within India who are doing their very best, to try and fight against what seems at the moment like an almost an impossible battle?
Thank you for that question. Actually, that's a very important question, Rahim. I wouldn't say that as a Muslim what I can do. I think it's the BJP and RSS, as much as they want to and they try to, and sometimes they even succeed to make it a Hindu-Muslim issue. It's not a Hindu-Muslim issue. It's fundamentally a issue of whether India wants to be, or they want to make India a fascist state or a democratic, liberal democracy or secular state. And it is heading towards a fascism. And your question about what anybody can do from outside India, the recent history tells us that fascism has, in the absence of foreign intervention, fascism has never been uprooted from any country, whether it is Germany or Italy or anywhere. Wow. It has been uprooted when some foreign intervention, external intervention happened, and that too not in the newspaper headings, but actual physical military you have seen in the past. Now, perhaps the military is not the game here. What is the political and trade pressure? As you can see, right in United Kingdom, I remember there are a number of MPs that BJP has slated to support and elect them. Yeah. A political party sitting in India is playing politics with foreign countries. That is not limited to UK. They have done that in Canada, and they are doing it in the United States. So the problem is not limited to India. I think if nothing else, I would like listeners to understand that this problem is not an Indian problem or within India. This is a problem of a global nature. RSS is not limited to just India. They are global. They are in UK, they are in US, they are in Canada, they are in Europe. So what that makes is maybe it's an opportunity that a lot of countries, a a lot of societies, a lot of institutions outside India can definitely do a lot of things to curtail it and end it. So there is a lot of opportunity there.
Yeah. I mean, if I can come to you, Shaheen, when we know that, look, going back to the riots in 2002, where Modi was in charge of the state and allowed all this stuff to happen, the international community, actually called him to account. He was banned from entering and traveling to the United States for some years. How negative is the message that goes out now when he's welcomed and on the steps of the White House, when he is, treated as a hero coming to the United Kingdom last year, selling out Wembley and, thousands of people coming to see him at one of our most iconic stadiums. How damaging are those images, and how important is it for us to be able to bring pressure on our politicians, on our elected politicians, say, look, this is unacceptable. What's going on here? As Rashid very pertinently said, fascism has never been defeated internally. It's always taken these outside forces to do it. How do we do that? How do we bring that mechanism into play?
Yeah, it is very important that international pressure is mounted on the Indian government. But that, as of now, doesn't seem to be going anywhere as of now, because yesterday, Boris Johnson accepted Modi's invitation to be the chief guest in the Republic Day parades on next month in India. So that shows, and the other day there was military talks and new defense pact signed with Saudi Arabia 2 days back, Indian government. So for international pressure to happen, there should also be a simultaneous mobilization inside India as well. If you look at for example, there was this 2018 World Bank report titled Intergenerational Mobility in India, which actually showed statistical data that educational mobility among Muslims were worse off than African Americans in the US. Wow. Now, you would find many such studies comparing as an analogy between African Americans in the US and Indian Muslims. So the problem one is that it is not just Muslims are victims of industrial scale or visceral violence like lynching. They are also victims of institutional violence as well over the years. So now, as in the African American example, we saw that whatever they got, although their condition is still much to be desired, but whatever freedom they got was through street mobilizations. And then the civil rights movement, Martin Luther King, Malcolm X, it was such a trajectory, such a history that actually led to whatever there is. Yeah. So there is an important thing that not just pressure on the government, also international solidarities and pressure to people mobilizing there as well. The sort of connection should be made. And in that way, Muslims also must be actually goaded to speak out for themselves. Yes. And the very fact that the title of our talk is Islamophobia in India, but so far there's not a single report inside India that mentions the word Islamophobia. Right. It is foreign inside India. Yeah. The first report that actually came out was in 2018 from the University of Berkeley. So even the fact that Muslims cannot even name the very phenomena that they are being oppressed, there's nothing inside Indian social science or academia that even to frame the word Islamophobia there. Yeah. That itself speaks volumes of the state of Muslims in India, or what they have before them.
So really, it's an uphill battle indeed. I mean, Sanita, we've spoken about the fact that this is a problem. Or Rashid said this is a global problem. As we said, it's outside. It's not just within India. It's all over the world. Shaheen very clearly expressing there how difficult it is to confront this. It's not just Muslims, is it? I mean, this RSS ideology. It's kind of against Muslims. Obviously, are the largest minority in India, a very visual minority, but it's other minorities are affected as well. The Sikh community are campaigning against this. The Christian community have had all sorts of issues. I mean, this is casting a blanket over all minorities and saying, "Are you Indian? Can you be Indian if you're not Hindu?"
There are Hindus among the thousands of political prisoners in India right now. It's not just about being Hindu, it's about towing the line of Hindutva, of Hindu nationalism. And so I wanted to add to what my brothers were just saying. But to your point, yes, absolutely. Muslims might be the first target, but with any system of fascism or other kind of systemic discrimination, there's no question that right behind the the Muslims, will be the Christians, will be the Dalit community of India, will be every minority, will be the women, will be the LGBTQ community.
Yeah.
There's no question that if the backbone is discrimination and Hindu exclusivism, then all minorities and everyone who disagrees, dissents, will be part of the, will be targeted. But, recently we were talking to an activist and about this issue of there being thousands upon thousands of political prisoners. Anybody who is Muslim, of course, or other minorities, or who is dissenting. The most recent for us personally is our advisory board member, Faisal Khan, who's a Gandhian peace activist. And so for listeners, people watching, please look up Faisal Khan and raise your voice for his freedom and all the political prisoners in India. But this activist said to us, basically, and it might have been a very low moment, but he basically said, the fight is over in India. It's what Amina was saying in the last section.
Wow.
If you speak, you are behind bars or you are dead. And so he was saying to us outside India to please use the privilege of our voice so that we can raise awareness. And we were saying, what can we do? There's one glowing example of what we could do that has been a great source of inspiration for me, and it builds on what Shaheen was saying. Reverend William Barber in the States has picked up the legacy of Martin Luther King Jr., and he has revived the Poor People's Campaign, which was Martin Luther King Jr.'s work at the end of his life, which was abruptly cut short.
Yeah.
And it's a movement across all communities focusing on the poor. How amazing would that be in India? And I'm not saying it should replace political activism and all the other kinds of things that we need to do, but if we can unite the poor across all the communities in India, that is the numerical majority. That is a beautiful, diverse tapestry of India. And if that can be done, taking the example of the Poor People's Campaign, I think miracles can happen.
And that's inspiring, and the similarities were made between the civil rights campaign and between what's happening in India at the moment. If I could come to you, Rashid, on this question, when we see what's happening in China, and we see the Uyghur Muslims, and we see the galvanization of international opinion now really putting some focus, nowhere near enough focus, but some focus on what's happening there, campaigns about where, knowing where your cotton comes from, putting that kind of political and economic pressure. Do you think that we can learn from that sort of example? What does that teach us about how we can perhaps from the outside approach what's happening in India at the moment?
Rahim, I don't know if what we can learn from the Uyghur situation in China is that absence of any, like Shaheen mentioned, internal dissent and struggle. If that cannot be done, like in China, you can't. And then, if there is no foreign intervention, then they are still in the retraining camps or re-educating camps. So I don't know what lesson there is. Maybe Indian government and Indian fascists are having a lesson that this is doable.
Yeah.
This can be done. But I want to, the fascism word is some people take it very easily. Many people just use this word for hyperbole or exaggerate. Let me just take 30 seconds and read you the actual law in India that is being used on a regular basis now. It is called UAPA, Unlawful Activities Prevention Act, UAPA. Just a couple of points. It's a law. I don't want to read the whole thing, but I'll give you 2 points on it. Under UAPA, both Indian and foreign nationals, I repeat, Indian and foreign nationals can be charged. It will be applicable to the offenders in the same manner, even if crime is committed on a foreign land outside India.
Wow.
Under the UAPA, the investigating agency can file a charge sheet in maximum 180 days. They don't need to report to anybody for 180 days after the arrests, and the duration can be extended further after intimating to the courts. So these are the tools of the fascism.
So it's
just one.
It's really chilling. It's actually chilling to hear that. If I could, I do apologise. You know, we're coming towards the end of the show. We could continue to talk about this for hours and hours. It really has been extremely enlightening. I read in the end of the first half, and I'd like to ask the three of you the same question. I read out the definition of fascism, the dictionary definition of fascism. And just to end on that note, the opinions and a comment from the three of you, whether we feel that we're heading towards a fascist state, whether we are in a fascist state. So the dictionary definition, fascism is a form of far-right, authoritarian, ultranationalism, characterized by dictatorial power, forcible suppression of opposition, and strong regimentation of society and of the economy. Shaheen, some final words. Do you feel that we've breached that now in India, the India of 2020?
Yeah, definitely. Yeah.
I mean,
that's the case there, because it's not just similarities and with Nazi Germany, Italy. It is the modes of mechanism of oppression that is operating there, the total impunity. And the way citizens are treated, Muslims, Christians, Dalits, for example, the way they're treated, the way things are legalized. I don't know if it was mentioned in the previous, there was a recent law on love jihad. So any Muslims or Muslim or non-Muslim, any sort of such marriage is under suspicion. And they can be arrested in in many states. There are laws curbing conversion. There are laws that can actually, as Dr. Rashid mentioned, these laws of UAPA, it turns around the entire maxim of law. That usually it is your innocent until proven guilty.
Yeah.
The UAP is the other way around. So, for example, I can at least cite 10 people I know who have been inside without trial for more than 10 years.
Wow.
Without trial. So it has already become fascist state, long time back here.
Well, thank you for that. And I'm very conscious of time. If I could come to yourself, Rashid, and Sanita, literally for one line, just some closing remarks on my question and your final thoughts. Rashid, yourself first of all.
Rahim, I strongly suggest another session on it. And the term Islamophobia it may be true in some other country, but in Indian context, Islamophobia is not the right term. Phobia means you're afraid of something. In India, these fascist BJP, RSS, and right-wing Hindutva guys, they have a visceral hate of Muslims and Islam. They're not afraid of Islam. They literally hate.
They literally hate.
I want to make the distinction here.
And thank you very much for that. And final word from yourself, Sanita.
So, yes, I mean, whether we're almost there or we're in a fascist state, yes, the answer is yes. And this particular kind of fascist state is a Hindutva state. Right. And I think we are in it. And the proof for me is the Babri Masjid Ram Mandir case. The Supreme Court last year said it is absolutely, a crime that in 92, the Babri Masjid, the 500-year-old mosque, was demolished by Hindus, and yet they gave the land to the Hindus. And this is the clincher for me. The plaintiff was Ram Lalla, baby Rama, in a secular democracy.
Yeah.
I don't think we need any other proof that we're in a Hindu Rashtra.
Well, look, thank you to you all. Thank you, Sanita Wishwanath. Thank you, Rashid Ahmed. Thank you, Shaheen Khatib-Parambal. Thank you to our guests in the first half as well. We are really honoured and indebted to you for opening our eyes to what's been going on. We wish you all the best with your work going forward to fight what is quite simply oppression. Thank you guys for joining us for the review. We'll be back with another episode of the review very shortly. Until then, from myself, from all of us here at Islam Channel, Assalamu alaikum.